Thank you, Javier. Moving on to the next slide, because I think now you're the people controlling the slides. So the person has to move with me. Okay. We had talked about the guiding questions on what we are going to talk about. So what is copyright? Next slide, please. What is copyright? Copyright. So I'll just keep talking and hope the person who's controlling the slides will join me as we go on. Copyright is basically creations of the mind that are either literary, artistic, or scientific. Literary works can be like books, lyrics. Artistic works can be like music, dance, drama, or actual art that we know. And then we have scientific works that include software, databases, and things of that nature. Okay, Mr. Javira, please mute your end. We are getting feedback, and you can just help me and move along with me. Okay. So the legal categories of works that we are looking at, the literary, artistic, and scientific works, do not necessarily restrict the type of work that will be protected. For example, when you say literary work, it doesn't cover everything because it could have a book, it could have lyrics, it could have so many things within there. So when you see these three categories, one should not think, hey, the law stopped there. No, the law doesn't stop there. There are very many subsets in there, and when you look at an actual creation, it will have very many copyrights embedded in. So the only thing that a work requires to qualify for protection is that it's an original work reduced in material form. Original kyetutegeeza nti tokopye, you used your independent effort watudde ne weeyiiza, because the nature of intellectual property or copyright is it's a creation of the mind, buli muntu akozesa bwongo bwe, or nti it reduced in material form to mean that it's not in secret, or Saimbe Kayimba in my shower, nobody has ever heard it apart from myself. I must have either have recorded it somewhere for another person to listen to it. And it doesn't matter the quality or the purpose of creation, as long as it's in a permanent, semi-permanent form in terms of fixation, and it is original. That's all that is needed. We'll move on to the next slide. The next slide is about the laws. What the laws are in terms of network. So I've removed my video. I hope that works. I don't know why. It's usually better than this. Okay. So for the laws of copyright, we hear so often people saying, ekikulu kya Uganda, why copyright takula teri mateeka. Government teri wali teeka. You know, there was even a time where parliamentarians themselves were saying there is no law for the protection of copyright. Fortunately, I had a nice presentation. Nice Manirachi, the person is not moving on their slide, the slides to the next one. Fortunately for us, thank you, Anthony. I'm requesting that whoever is handling who's moving around the slides, just keeps with me so that presentation and to also not bore everybody. So the laws for copyright started as far back as 1943 in Uganda. However, when we look at the world space in terms of copyright, by 1883, they had started making laws around copyright. So in 1943, what you're seeing here is everything you see in maroon are laws that are from Uganda and affect copyright. Everything you see in gray are international laws. Everything you see in what looks like light gray or brown are laws from Uganda that are not directly related to copyright, but affect copyright. And then the last one, that's the dark gray, is the future. So by 1943, there was the Stage Plays and Public Entertainment Act. One would ask, why bring it back now? Some action happened in 2018 around that act. So in 1964, we had a Copyright Act. As you can see, this is before independence, pre-independence. In 1965, Uganda signed the Paris Convention of 1983. In 1995, we had the TRIPS Agreement. But seeing that we had a 1964 law for copyright, by 2006, this law, had become obsolete. It was not working anymore. Okumanya nti for what we are doing, ebiri mu 1964 law ikyatugasa. So by 2006, the Parliament passed a new Copyright Act. And in 2010, there were regulations under this act, okuyambako enforcing the act. So if we even stopped at that point, it is not the case when people say, oh, there's no law. There's a So 2011, because it provides for electronic transactions. So providing content on like YouTube, Google, things like that will, at the moment, were hosted under that Electronic Transactions Act. So while it's not a copyright law, by the fact that copyright works are broadcast or provided, or content is provided on such platforms, then that law applies to copyright. We have the Uganda Communications Act in 2013, important again because most of our broadcasters, the people who are our users of copyright works, are governed or are regulated by that act. In 2018, an international law came in, the Marrakesh Treaty, to allow people to use works to help, the people who are blind or people who are visually impaired or print disabled to also access works. Then in 2018, there was the chaotic regulations for public entertainment and stage plays that came out of the 1943 Act. People were so annoyed over these regulations. And the question was, where did they come from? Who even, it's like it had come from the blue. But the government went and picked them from the Act in 1943, the first Act we see here, and they made regulations under those acts. Really, that the relationship between the Stage Plays and Public Entertainment Act and Copyright Act is simple. Think about having land or having a car. You can have a car and there'll be a lot of importation and ownership of your car, the traffic laws. However, if you want to operate a taxi or to operate public transport, you need to get a license to do that thing. Or you might have your land and you're governed by the Land Act. There's a Mining Act, so you're not going to open a license. So that's the same relationship between the Copyright Act and the Stage Plays and Public Entertainment Act. The Copyright Act will provide for the right itself, in this case, the copyright for the song, or equivalent to the land or the car. The Stage Plays and Public Entertainment Act and their regulations in 2018 give you the licenses to make the public performances, etc., etc. 2019, we got the Security Interest in Movable Property Act. This act is also not a direct copyright law, but in this act, we see that now a person can use their song as security. Again, an bank or money lender, or even from another person. So just like people are using their land, their cars, etc. Now you can also use your copyright to get funding or financing for the next project, etc. We have in future, what we are looking at is all those treaties that the government is thinking about ratifying and maybe amending our laws and the Copyright Act and regulation. All these things, anything written in the future, someone might say, we should be focusing on what we have on ground. The funny thing is all these 1996 laws and 1886 laws, the principles in those things are already embedded in our Copyright Act, and yet we are not signatory. For example, Berne Convention, members who are other countries that are members to Berne Convention freely protect each other's works, but Uganda is not a member. And yet in our law, we're protecting our works over other people. So that means Ugandan works might not stand a very good chance abroad, and yet by law, by the local law we've done, the Copyright Act for us, we are protecting other people's works. So Uganda Registration Services Bureau and the government are working, hard to ensure that all these international principles that are already embedded in our laws are actually ratified, and we move along. So moving on to the next slide. Next slide, please. The types of copyright, the type of rights under copyright. Copyright, when you look at copyright, there will be the work itself and then the people who have come up with the work. The work itself, and for today, tugenda kozesa nyimba as the example because we are talking about music. The work, music will have right of the subject matter. For example, lyrics or the composition, the musical composition, because lyrics can just be, words. Another person could use it as a poem and not as music, but another person will compose the music that goes into the lyrics. So that becomes the copyright, the subject matter of the copyright. Then we have what we call neighboring rights. Neighboring rights are rights that are related to the copyright. How? In most cases, there might be lyrics, there might be the musical composition, but you need a producer to actually add the mechanical works and etc. to make a song for us to listen to, or to make a video for people to watch. So, or your omuntu producer agenda computer companies nazo zifuna what we call broadcasting companies nazo zirina neighboring right. Then performers, it's very important to know the rights that performers have. Why? Our creative space in music is very, very active. Naye, even when you look at the membership of UPRS later, most of the members we have are performers. Some performers are lucky to house themselves or to be lyrists, music composers, producers, etc. But other people, God only blessed with voices. So they are just ready to sing or dance or do this. Other people play that role. So these people who are performers, now we have a neighboring right, performers. So these two rights, the copyright and neighboring right, are split into two rights: economic rights and moral rights. Economic rights are simply the rights that allow an owner to use their work to make money. So commercial exploitation of your work, distribution, reproduction, performance publicly, renting it, lending it, adapting it, translating it into another language, selling, or even authorizing another person to do any of those things. So those are economic rights, making money. Moral rights, these are rights that usually attach to an author. Lwaki with the author and owner. It is sometimes the author, the person who has maybe written the song or made the music or produced the song, that human being, an author must always be a human being, might be employed. While they are the author, they're not the owner of that work. Employer, work, considering the owner, or they've just commissioned them to do something. Angela Katatumba was commissioned by the British High Commission to sing for them environmental friendly songs. In that situation, British High Commission will be the owner of the song, then the artist will be just the author. Author has two types of rights. a paternity right to be identified or acknowledged when the work is being used as the author, or to claim authorship. So tolaba oluyimba lwo nga balukuba omuntu mulala agamba oluyimba lwawandikibwa gundi. When you know who the actual person is, you have a right to claim ownership. Then a right of integrity. Right of integrity, it generally allows an author to object to distortion, dilution, generally misuse of your work in any way. For example, Judith Babiri asanze oluyimba lwe balukuba mu kimansulo. Ayinza okugamba bannange nze ng'omuyimbi wa gospel, I didn't envision for my work to be played like this. So those are the types of rights and the types of the main rights, and then the types of rights that will be under copyright. Moving on to the next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, protection of copyright works. Copyright, all you need to do is create something original, fixing in some sort of material form that can be perceived by other people. And that is all you need for the work to be protected. Registration is voluntary, and unlike other types of intellectual property, for copyright, you don't need to be registered to have the copyright. Copyright, as long as the original, you've not copied anyone, at ochi fixing, you've recorded the song, or one the lyrics book, you've used the best paper or the best publication style, you're protected. Registration is voluntary. However, ideas, concepts, procedures, and things of such nature cannot be protected by copyright. Kitegeeza ki nti omuntu yasooka okuyimba about love can't say siraba omuntu yenna omulala ng'ayimba about love. Why? Two people who have never met, never discussed, can conceive of a similar idea without ever meeting. Naye the execution of that idea can never be the same. Tosobola kungamba nti all the love songs zetuwulidde mu nsi mu zifaanagana, and yet people started singing about love since time immemorial. Nakati bakyayimba about love. So the idea or the concept of love songs cannot be owned by one person. Buli omu protecting their actual work. So we've talked about registration being voluntary. Registration is necessary but voluntary. So teri agenda kukwata ku piece of registering. It's up to you to go to UPRS and register your song. But jetujja maaso, you'll see why registration is important, even though it is not mandatory. Keeping evidence, identification of your work and yourself as the author, and maintaining records really to show this is mine, I'm the one who did this, and it is easier for you also so when you're trying to commercialize, to make money, nga abettaka bwe bafuna ssente nnyingi mu ttaka zaabwe, ab'emmotoka ne copyright tusobola omufunamu ssente, naye olaze otya abantu nti kino kyange. Registration is the only way you're going to be able to say, I have this certificate. Otherwise, you'll have to bring other evidence, kati nze nasooka nenkola timestamps, etc. Okwanguya amangu ebintu, obeera n'ekyapa, in this case, certificate of title, oba oyitawo misinde. Then infringement of copyright is omuntu yenna n'akozesa your work without your permission, and that use falls outside what is allowed by law, because what your uses mu mateeka ezikkirizibwa. For example, education, informing, on matters of the day in the news, things like that. There are few instances where the law permits people to use your work without asking your permission. However, except in those instances, a person must always ask for permission to either use, license, listen to, whichever way your work. If they don't, then they are infringing. And infringement will only be actionable for you to go to court or to claim against this person if the person has used either the whole work or a substantial part. Why tebagamba just the whole work? Imagine omuntu n'asalawo okozesa oluyimba lw'atumbiza sound. Ayinza obutagenda n'akoppa the whole song from the beginning to the end. Naye ayinza okugyamu paati abantu gye basinga okumanya ey'ettutumu n'asalawo nti kati akooke ngenda okukozesa kati ke kasinga okutunda luli oluyimba. And perhaps if you sang the first verse and the second one, people might not know the song, but for that specific beat, people know what you're talking about. So are considered as a substantial part of the work. So if you take that, over infringement. And also infringement includes infringement of the moral rights, this is why you get the reputation and integrity of the author. Next, please. Next slide, please. So Moving away from protection of copyright works, duration of rights. Moral rights is for the right of paternity to be identified as the author and the right of integrity. They exist forever. Forever. In your life and in your death, you will always have your moral rights. And even when you die, your estate can help you to enforce your rights. Abakusikira bonna katuka tugambe fire bombo lyutaya wadde taliiwo oba radio moze basobola okusigala nga enforcing moral rights. Economic rights. If you're an individual, a human being, any right you have in copyright is protected in your lifetime and 50 years after your death. So any copyright that radio had is protected, was protected during his life. Kati ate ye obulamu bwe bambi his engeri gye bwaggwawo twatandika okubala the 50 years after his death. If he has a song that he owned together with Weasel nga bw'akyali omulamu, if they were co-authors, tuba tubala Weasel, tetujja gamba nti 50 years have lapsed kati tukomako. If they jointly owned and the 50 years lapse is after death ya radio nga naye Weasel akyaliwo, tubeera tukyali during the lifetime of the existing author. So ye aba akyabala kyagenda. Then if it's a legal entity, the work will be protected 50 years from the date of first publication of the work. So wabeera for example, production houses nga ye owner that copyright. The production house will only own the work 50 years from the date of first publication, not lifetime of the legal entity. Then audiovisual recording, sound recording, broadcasters, those are the people who have neighboring rights. Our producers, TVs, radio stations, but we are in the, pushing ahead our copyright works. Any right that they get in works is protected for 50 years from the date of making it available. Then performers, remember, performing right program is separate from the actual copyright. So if you are like radio, who has both the lyricist, the composer, the performer, he would have all these different separate rights. And performers have their rights for 50 years from the date of performance of the work. Moving on to the next slide. If we look at a song as an example, and we are trying to analyze what is copyright in song. A song, one song can have 3 to 4 copyrights, or even more, depending on what has been put down. There will be the composition of the song, which includes the lyrics and the musical composition itself, or the against and the melody. Then there will be the recording, which will have the sound recording, or the audio compilation, or even the visual compilation. So today we know your song might not go so far if you just sing and make an audio. People want to see videos. So you'll be forced to make the video also. So in that case, that one song will have 4 types of rights. These 4 types of rights, in some instances, are owned by 4 different people. Sometimes one person can have all these rights, or it can be an interplay of so many things. Sometimes there can be a 5th where there's a master recording. So to begin someone is saying I reduce my Uganda. Okay. One song can have all these different types of rights, and these rights might be owned by different people. So moving on to the next slide. So the right in a song that we've seen, that's the composition being the lyrics and the musical work itself, the melody, and then the sound recording or visual recording will be the copyright. So anyone who has the right in one of these 3 things will have copyright. Then any person who plays a related role to the other work that was created gets the neighboring right. So the producers, the performers, the broadcasting companies, if they've done anything to make the work possible, then they get the neighboring right. Next slide, please. So in a song, we've seen that, and we are really going to move over this slide very quickly, that will usually have two types of rights: the sound recording and the composition, which has the lyrics and the music. Next, please. So we have a problem in Uganda. We have such good music, we have such creative people, but we're not making money. Why? We've been told and made to believe that intellectual property or copyright is not as important as having land or having a car or having a garden or having, all these things. However, where we are going, we're in the knowledge-based economy. I would like to ask, for example, if you have a kataka, say a kololo, short of you buying away a person who is already there, it might be impossible today to go to Kololo to find free land that is there that has never been bought. Why? Because real property, tangible property in its nature is finite. It has an end to it. However, intellectual property in its nature cannot be stopped. We will create, there can never be a cap to the number of songs that can be sung. People will sing, people have been singing since time immemorial, so we need to start thinking how we make money from our music. Being famous without being making money. Why should people who have 100 land titles consider themselves rich? 500 songs, they're considering a rich. How do you make money from your copyright? You can do assignments or transfer. Just like land or car people. They sell it, make money from it, use that money, invest in maybe getting the next car or the next deal or whatever. So copyright can also be seen the same. And the thing with assignment or transfer is, if you sell, you've moved on. It's now the other person's property. It's no longer yours. There'll be different instances where you would want to sell. Some people write songs, in the books, you've not sung it really, you've not released it. You have assets there that you're not doing anything with. You could sell it to the next person who might sing it, or, but to think about how to make money out of these songs. Licenses basically will help you to make money while retaining your work. And for licenses, we're going to see a deeper understanding of licenses. Why? There are so many ways and so many things you can do. The other rights we talked about, the economic rights of distribution, reproduction, renting, leasing, etc. All those are things for which you give a license. So you retain your work, a person a license to distribute, to reproduce, to translate, etc. etc. Then there's collateral. So for this one, I will not say too much because there's more detail in the next slides. Moving on to the next slide. So assignment, we've talked about it, that it can be whole or partial. You can say maybe I wrote that music and the lyrics. Jakutunza lyrics, obankunze music, then the lyrics, you own the musical composition and whatever. And the payment, you can decide, you pay me maybe every time you sing or whatever, or there will be a fixed sum, or even both. You can decide whichever way you want to do it. Moving on to the next slide. Licensing, like we've said, you're going to allow a person to give them permission to use your work for a specific reason. Maybe Stanbic Bank, I've given you a right to use my song called Party After Party for this product, for this period, etc. For a short period of time. And you tell them the specific reason. So that doesn't mean never distributing, but just allowed them to use for that specific reason. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah. License can be exclusive, sole, or ordinary. An exclusive license is almost like a lease. Abaine taka, oba, abamanyi kubye taka. Omuntu alina lease, you don't have the title to the land in itself, but you get a title to the lease. You're allowed to use that land as if you're the owner of the land until that lease expires. So that's the exclusive license in this case also. And that license, nayo in its nature, does not allow the owner to also use but if you give an exclusive license to another person, you can't use the song they again because for that reason, whatever reason you're giving them the license for. Then sole allows you, the owner, and one other person. Then ordinary, you can have various people using your song for various reasons. It's mixed, and it's the one that is most commonly seen. There's compulsory licenses by law, where as a copyright owner, the only thing you'll be allowed to do is to receive your money. These are your royalties for this, but there's an administrative body. In this case, it would be URSB as the National Copyright Office to oversee. There's an important project, there's an important song that is going to deliver the message. For example, how Tumbiza sound, if we could take that example, Tumbiza sound is going to deliver the message for eradication of corona. We are going to take a compulsory license for this song. That doesn't mean that it's taken for free. No, they'll just deliver the money that is going to the owners of Tumbiza sound for the different types of rights. Remember the trial get deco, because it might be that later the video. So whoever the producer of the video is about a jack because it's not, they've not used your video. So if they've used it, another story altogether. But then you just get your money and it just cuts you out of the equation to bargain. Yeah. Moving on to the next slide. The next slide I'm sure talks about, it just shows the differences between assignment and license, which I've talked about. So we can just move on to the next one. But just on that slide, to just be sure, just move to the next slide. To be sure, Auntie, if you want an assignment, you do an assignment. If you want a license, don't ever use language in a contract. Auntie, you meant a license, then you are gamba assignment. Those things can lock you in very dangerous situations. Collateral. This word is so big and it's a discouraging term. In short, you can use your copyright, like how people use cars, houses, valuable property, cash accounts, investments. If people start to make other money, you can also use your copyright like that. Moving on to the next slide. So in 2019, there was a new law, security interest in movable property. What that law did is already existing things like things that are not real property, like houses and land. People borrow money on their motorcycles, business stock, pledge their gardens. So that business was already going on. And in 2019, the government made a law to kind of crystallize everything. One place where lenders go and record. So no manyanti, I can go and check at URSB how many other people's what this law did, it included intellectual property, therefore copyright, as one of the things that can be used as security for a borrowing. So moving on to the next slide, that now copyright, like land or like a car or like a motorcycle, you can use it for security. How? Mortgage. You get your copyright, I am the owner of the musical composition of this song. Title yange, I've gone to the bank, I've gone to the money lender, I've gone to the microfinance, or my neighbor. I want you to give me money. My assurance is this is my property. Lend me money based on this. In that agreement, you will agree that the moment I pay you, then everyone, everything crosses, the mortgage crosses, because it would be like an assignment, but with a reversion. But the moment I pay you, I've redeemed my song, my musical composition, that's mortgage. Next slide is we'll have what we call a charge. A charge, about shares in companies, usually you know it. Charges, you can say, I can have, since I have shares in this company, without saying I have a specific thing I'm giving you. I'm going to give you a charge. In case anything happens, you could take my shares. So the same thing will happen over copyright. You will go, for example, you need money for school fees. People borrow for their children's school fees over their motorcycles, over their gardens, but can't do the same thing for for copyright, and yet it's the same. It's the same work that other people are benefiting from. So you can also get a charge. A charge use copyright, and you charge it, and another person will give you money or financing. Moving on to the next slide is securitization. Securitization. So the other two here, those two things, the charge and the mortgage, apply to the actual work itself, the actual right. I am the performer in this song, so I have performing rights. Or that the performing right itself is what you're going to get a certificate for and pledge. I mean, that is what it is. Securitization, on the other hand, you're going to say, for whatever role I have, I want to use my future possible income and get immediate capital. People who are in the music space and listen to music abroad, you might know a man called David Bowie. He's in the picture here. A person like David Bowie decided that he had very many projects he wanted to do, but he didn't have money, or he didn't have immediate capital, but he knew that his songs would sell so much and he would make so much money. David Bowie decided to go to people that had money and ask them to give him money, immediate capital, in exchange for future capital. So they would agree that when this song comes out, maybe the first 4 years or the first 2 years, if it's a platinum hit, if it's whatever, this is how much money you get. Or that period should allow you to get your money. And he did not pledge his songs, but he pledged the royalties that were going to come out of his music. So you can use this same method to also say, I know that Malamu, for example, is going to make money or is making money. So in the next 4 months, I guarantee you, give me 10 million shillings so that I do my next project. Sente za Malamu is for the next 1 month or the next 2 months, we'll be able to pay your money. Next slide, please. Yes, so those three ways, assignment, licenses, and collateral or securitization, are ways in which a person can make money from their copyright or from their song. Moving on to the animal collective management. Collective management is generally people of the same rights coming together under copyright law to manage their rights together. Why? The nature of copyright is, if you have 10 songs or if you have 1 song, then you won't be able to go to Kampala, Mbarara, Bulu, Bushenyi. Even in Kampala itself, you won't be able to be in Nakawa, Kawempe at the same time. It is terribly difficult to enforce your rights as a single owner, and yet there's a breadth of so many rights. So the law, the Copyright Act, and generally international law, all those treaties we've signed up to and want to sign up to, have collective management. This system is there to help owners of rights come together. If you have similar rights, you come together, create a pool of rights, and then that entity that is created, usually a non-profit organization, will help you, especially license rights to commercial users of your works, and we will see who the commercial users of this work are. Next slide, please. So in Uganda, we have several collecting societies. And there's by law, there is only one collecting society for each category or bundle of rights. You can't have multiple, rights. It's one for each bundle, for each type. And the regulator is UPRS. Currently, we have UPRS for musical works, music. We have UFMI for film or audiovisual works. These two might interplay really because music also has audiovisual. Then we have URRO, which is for literary works, books, poems, and generally publishers and people in that space. So for any of these CMOs, it's voluntary membership. But remember what we've said as we move on to the next slide, 1 CMO or 1 collecting society per bundle of rights. You can't have duplicity unless there's a thing to say, if the CMO is not working, the members come up in arms and say it's not working, we need to move away from it. So for music, UPRS is the flag bearer for collecting for and issuing licenses to commercial users for musical rights. Moving on to the next slide, I am sure this information that is in this slide can be found on the website. So the history of UPRS is it existed as far back in the spirit of the Performing Rights Society of UK. Before independence, as you've seen, our laws date back as 1943. So in those days, as most of the things used to come from the UK, the Performing Rights Society of the UK was in Uganda, and people were paying, people were getting money from PRS, etc., etc. In 1970s, meantime, there was a bit of turbulence. People were leaving. Independence had come, so everything got mambo jumbled up. After the 1970s, now that PRS would not be in Uganda anymore, we were now independent people. UPRS was created. And as you can see, they added a U to the PRS to their Uganda Performing Rights Society. In 1985, fast forward to 2006. So by 1985, that PRS was under the other Copyright Act that we talked about, the first one of 1964. Now we are in 2006 and there's a new law. Moving on to the next slide. There's a new law that provides for what a CMO should do. Just help me keep tapping so that the things in this slide show. You'll see it to the end. Just keep moving as if you're going to the next slide. So just keep moving and make sure that all the things show. Yes. So, oops. Yeah. So 2019, July 2019 to date is what is important today, really. In 2019, by 2019, there's chaos in UPRS and in Uganda and in the music industry. Things are not working. I know for a fact because as I was an outsider in UPRS at that time. I was on the enforcer's side because I'm an intellectual property lawyer. And there were so many people who were acting, no one knows what's happening. It was expected really that things would fall apart. Why? Works had now become so big. Ugandan music had grown, membership had grown, and the society or the corporate nature of the society had not grown. They were not thinking about how to actually run the society. It was still being run the way it was being run in the 80s. So things had to fall apart inevitably. So by July 2019, there was an inquiry, a stakeholders meeting was involved, and in March 2020, URSB as the regulator decided this has gone on for too long, we have to commence a restructure. There was actually a proposition to kill the whole thing, to just start afresh. It was all mooted, but decided, how about we restructure this thing? For all these years we've had since 1985, we can't throw them away to waste. We will not be 20 years or, as a society, we won't be all those things anymore. And we lose all these, international relations we've had. So how about we salvage the situation and not just kill it? So in October 2020, there was a special annual general meeting that sat, and there was amendment to the corporate documents of UPRS. They agreed how many board members will be there. The members, remember we said it's a members organization. And by November 2020, Uganda Registration Services Bureau had inaugurated a new board. The board kicked work, was fully constituted in 2021 at the beginning of the year, and the modernization of UPRS started. This timeline is important because from March 2020 to date, there's still, there's been COVID, so many things have stalled. And yet this is the period within which the implementation of all the recommendations that had been given, that came out of the inquiry, and that, a caretaker had been appointed for UPRS to see, should we kill this thing? Should we keep it? This period when things should be moving, the whole world, and now Uganda, everything is not working because of COVID-19. However, so much is happening in the background. Next slide, please. So where we are right now, we are in the phase of modernization of UPRS and the members. So what are the key functions of UPRS? License commercial users of members of the musical works. So anyone who wants, if it's a hotel, if it's a DJ, if it's a club, jukebox owners, they go to UPRS to get licenses to use, not to own, to use, because those are the rights that they are giving them. So UPRS would say, for this type of person, what license do they need? A distributorship. What type of license do they need? Performance. What type of just usage? Public performance. So you'll be given a specific license to use for that specific rate that is related to you. Then and the other function is to monitor members' works and to enforce rates. If you manage to go through the legal, there's what we call the Uganda Online Law Library, or ULI, you'll find so many cases that have been filed by UPRS on behalf of its members, while there are also others that have been filed by the right holders themselves, because nothing stops a right holder from enforcing their own right. But UPRS, because of strength in numbers, is fighting for rights, and they can, move around also. For example, if you wanted to start a war on callback tunes or ringtones, it might be hard where it's one person pushing the agenda, one artist. It is better where it's a collecting society moving together, because at that point, everybody's rights are being enforced. Collecting. UPRS has a function to collect royalties from the licenses granted to the commercial users of works. Remember, we said commercial use, not personal free use. And see the differences between commercial use and free use. For example, a wedding is considered personal use. If I have a wedding at my house with a few of my friends, I bring out my phone and a small speaker, play the music. I don't need to get a license from UPRS. However, if I have my wedding, which is considered not public performance, and I hire a DJ, that DJ is conducting commercial use of their work. That DJ must have had a license from UPRS to use that music, because when they're making money from the work. So if I choose to just put it on my boombox and play the music, no license. If I get a DJ, license. If I get a band, license. Then distribution. After licensing, monitoring, and collecting, UPRS has a function of distributing royalties collected to its members. Next slide. This is very important, because if you collect and you don't distribute, then in the end, the people who own the work are not benefiting from this. The current member segments of UPRS are publishers, composers / authors, and performers. There are 42 assessed. There are 42 registered publishers. So those are money bags, the guys who come. You know this, the people who put money in the music, the Kasiwukiras, the late Kasiwukiras and crew. We have 600 composers or authors. So these are the lyricists. It would even have also the the sound engineers or the music producers, as we call them sometimes. And then we have 3,500 performers. So the performers, of course, will sometimes also be included in the 600, or sometimes also included in the 42. But sometimes a performer might not be all these things and might just be a performer. So there are 3,500 performers currently as members of UPRS. Next slide, please. So we see that if UPRS collects any money or royalties from the commercial licenses issued, then they distribute to those people. UPRS operates tariffs. By law, as a collecting society is expected to have a tariff that shows who are the people we collect from and how much they pay, maybe annually or per song, whichever tariff that has been decided or that has been created. A tariff can be created with the help of CMO, the member, and the users. Like anything, if you're selling a car, togenda kutunda motoka yo nga gwe weesalirawo, you can say, I have my car home, njagala katunda $1,300,000. Okay, no one ever stopped anyone from wishful thinking 30 million for our womb. Okay, but the market might say tukuwa 16 million. Why? They maybe, if it is this year, that means you've used it much, the engine, so all that information will help to come up to the actual cost or the actual price. Then that's the market price. Then you go to your buyer and you tell the buyer, I have 15 in mind. And the buyer will say, 15 cash down. If you take the 15, I give it to you. I have it. Then you weigh your options. Do I take the 16 that the market is giving, or this sure 15 that the tariff that the person buying? So it's the same thing about tariffs and coming up with the value of these tariffs. There are 37 tariff categories that are enforced by UPRS. However, this is just an example of those tariffs, or the people, the commercial users, that UPRS can collect from. Moving on to the next slide. So you'll see that if you fall within any of those groups, or if you know people that fall within any of those groups, they should be, UPRS should be collecting from them. And we'll understand maybe why things have not been going well. So that short statistics of where we are today, we have close to 4,000 members, close to 16,000 works. These works include reciprocal works that we enforce for foreign collecting societies, because, like we said, because of the Berne Convention, those international treaties, people enforce for each other everywhere. Because, like we said, if it's difficult for an artist to enforce their rights in their song in Kampala, would you manage to go to Kenya, go to even the Bermuda Triangle? So what they usually do is every collecting society, wherever it is, mixes with, gets an agreement with whoever is in that specific country. In Uganda for music, it would be UPRS, and they agree, collect for me, I will collect for you in Nigeria. At the end of that day, we say, how much did you collect for me? Everyone sends to the other, and then it balances out. So when we talk about works, it's not just Ugandan works, but all works, Ugandan, foreign, etc., as long as they fall within UPRS's mandate, either as members' works or works of collecting societies for which UPRS has agreements to enforce their foreign works. So those reciprocal agreements are currently 35. So the last column shows us the potential. Where could we be? Currently, we have 2,550 registered assessed users, the people who are using, either banks, discotheques, bars, restaurants, all those people, aircrafts, CA, all those people will be under the 2,550, but could be as many as 253,000, and the works could be as many as 126. And I actually don't like to have a number on works because, like we said, we can never have an end. As we go to the next slide, we can never have an end to music or to the creation of copyright works. So that said, if we're talking about money and collecting societies giving money or royalties, how then do we explain music royalties? Who gets paid when a song is played, when a song is used, when a song is used in an advert, when a song is used in a movie, who gets paid? Remember, we said there are two main rights in a song. There's the composition, which includes the lyrics and the melody or the musical composition, and then there's the recording, that's the sound recording or the video. The different people who will own, there'll be, for the composition, there'll be the songwriter, the lyricist, then there'll be the composer of the music, and then there'll be a publisher, the person who perhaps put in money for this to to happen. Then for the neighboring rights or for the recording, there'll be the rights owner, usually the record label, and then the performer, the person who gave life to the song for it to be sung. Might be a lyricist, but with a terrible voice. So I need help of someone to sing for me. So they're there. So when a song is played, or when money is collected, in the end, it's going to be split down to things like this as we move to the next slide, that we will not just look at it as one big fat song, but you look at it and say, what has been played, what is relevant, and Igwetu Sasula, in this case, who's relevant. So the World Intellectual Property Organization is a UN agency, like we have UNICEF for children, and so it's the UN agency for intellectual property around the world. Of course, Uganda is a member of the UN. Uganda is also a member of the World Intellectual Property Organization. The World Intellectual Property Organization are people who have been, behind those laws we saw of 1883, etc. So they've created like a world order of what can be used in different instances. For copyright collection and distribution, this is what they recommend, that where a gross amount is collected of 100%, 70% must be paid to the members, and then 30% is retained by the CMO, because remember, CMO is a corporate entity that has employees, that has enforcement agents, has all these things, that is actually enforcing the work. So they retain 30% to assist in CMO operation. Moving on to the next slide. So going forward, our 100% becomes 70%. The 70% that must go to the members. If we look at the part that says revenue split model, if we have a song and we are looking at it 70% being the 100%, 60% of that 100% will be paid for the musical work. So that's the composer, author, lyricist, or, sorry, not all. And then the 40% will be paid to the people who have the neighboring rate, so the sound recording. If we split the 60% further, we'll have the composer gets 25%, author gets, or lyricist gets 25%, publisher gets 50%. Why? In most cases, this person put in the money. They put in the money for the song to happen. So they will get the 50, then the person who did the musical composition gets the 25, then the person who wrote the lyrics will get 25%. Onto the 40%, it's split equally. The performer will get 50% of that 40%, and the producer will also get 50%. I have a case study for you on this side to say if $1,000 was collected, the people of the musical work get $600, the sound people get $400. The composer gets $150, the lyrics person gets $150, publisher $300, performer $200, producer $200. In total, $1,000. Moving on to the next slide. So you understand that because all these rates are separate, you get whatever is due to you for your type of rate. I've seen very many questions popping in, and I'll be excited to answer them as we go along. But what's the state of affairs of copyright in Uganda? Fortunately or unfortunately, as we'll see, the state of affairs is we are in a very, very creative space. There's a vibrant society, it's a young society, everyone is singing, everyone is creating. There's so much work that is being created. However, it is almost pathetic and unfair that it's also stated that there are high unemployment rates. Why? Because this industry in itself is capable of making people the whole industry can have 44 billion shillings a year. So this in itself could be employment, but creativity has been deemed, to just be what people do in their free time or because they've failed in life, crazy things like that. And yet, if we look at people who are rich, people who have been listed by Forbes, people in the entertainment industry are capable of making so much money and changing the economy. Sorry, back to the other slide. Massive growth. Ugandan music has grown so much. In the past, we used to listen to so much foreign music, but these days it is rare that, these days is a bit weird because these days was before COVID, that I would go to a party and they were playing, foreign music. They'll play Ugandan music from the beginning to the end and everyone is still having a good time. That means the field is growing. So this enhanced growth, the massive growth, has also spurred regulators to become more active. URSB has revived regulation of CMOs. I mean, we can see from UPRS itself, the restructuring. When members said they can't have it anymore, there was a restructuring. They have an enforcement unit in case someone needs enforcement of their copyright, there to do it. The new CC, as a regulator, also cited what we call the broadcasting policy way back in 2013, but it's been reviewed and it's going on, really well. 70% of all content on Uganda that's broadcast by Ugandan broadcasters must be Ugandan content or must be local content. And that includes music, drama, education, etc. And you'll see that in all these categories, music is still, really plays a big role. So we've had broadcasters here and there with the feeling of, if these people want us to enforce, then we might have to drop their works and what. Well, the regulator doesn't have, you must have the 70%, you must find the 70%. So you must play Ugandan music because that's a requirement to grow, the Ugandan space. So as the music is being played either on the radio or on the TV, there must be money that is being made by the owners of the music. Low earnings. As we are saying all these nice things about our copyright space, our music industry. Our music industry is characterized by fame without fair value or revenue. People are famous and will commonly die poor. There are a number of artists who have made it in life in Uganda, but there's also a mammoth of people who have sung and given of themselves, but have not made anything much to say they've made something, but it was not really what they should have made. And the good thing is UPRS as a CMO has the right, has the responsibility to change tariffs, to review tariffs, to change categories, to do everything in their power that they can do. Moving on to the next slide. So the way it is, as we know that we have a new board of directors, like we said, we went through turbulent times. There were things that happened that perhaps were inevitable because, you know, there was that saying, we used to say, if you don't change in peace, change will change you by force. So there were things that were done. And in all fairness, the people who lived before did what they could. Unfortunately, the world grew faster and things had to change. So now we have a new board, and moving on to the next slide, I really just threw these slides to kind of show people who is for. So we have elected members, and then we have the appointed members. The elected members are elected by the members in the different categories: publishers, the performers, the producers, every group voted their person who is a board member. Then the regulator also appointed different people, depending on different, their qualities, to be independent members on the board. Those are the people you see on the other side that has my face on it. But if you follow copyright and music, you'll know that all the people that have been selected in the as the independent directors have a link or a linkage to either intellectual property or music itself. We know Ms. Okelo is in UNCC making a difference. Professor Mangen is out there in Makere making a difference in the music and arts industry. Robert Semakula, I could talk about each of these people, but that's the new board. Moving on. The new board, right now, because we've been active maybe since the beginning of 2021, really. If we say I'm on the next slide now. If we've been doing, active participation. However, the new board has, next slide, please. The new board has things that they aspire, a long game that we intend to play. There's all this potential that copyright has, or that music has in Uganda. If we collected all this money, you'll see, for example, commercial public transport. If there are 35,000 units, we could get 14 billion a year. So if taxis actually paid their royalties, that's how much money we would get. Even if we collected just that money, there's already a change in people's lives. So there are all these different categories and the different money that can be collected. But because one UPRS was not being run, like a real entity, it doesn't have proper employees, it was really bleeding. It was, you could not achieve all these collections that are possible. The cubes in yellow are of specific interest to me because these are things that might not have been said before, but are things that can make us so much money. The blank tape levy is a levy that comes out of the principle of fair use. You know how we said that if you're playing music at a wedding personally on your own speaker, you don't need to get a license. So in the law, that's considered as permitted use or free use. But what in most countries, and our law actually has this provision, what most countries that have that provision have is they introduce what they call a blank tape levy to say, if you're bringing in any tape or any blank thing that can contain music, we don't know whether you're going to use it as commercial or whatever, for us we'll charge you a small amount of money on importation of that thing too, for you to go and do whatever it is. We will find you later in whatever category you fall, but on this blank tape, on the mobile phone, on the computer, on the flash disk, on importation, for it being a blank tape, because we know you're going to move music around on it and we won't be there to police you. For that private use, you will pay X amount of money. So if we had a blank tape levy in Uganda, we'd be able to collect 255 million. This is something we are currently pushing for so much because that in itself contributes to the 100% gross collection of UPRS. Moving on, so this slide should just be able to show you where collections can come from and how much is the potential and what the leakages are really. So what are the board priorities, this new board? As you've seen, all the people on the board, if they are members, they were elected, and the regulator has also taken time to pick specific people from different areas to facilitate the running of UPRS, so that we no longer have the excuse of, it didn't have corporate governance, etc., etc. So we are trying to see how to go about it. So on the one hand, we have a focus on members. The new board is playing a long game where we want to create a situation that sees regular payment of value royalties. I put the word value in red to mean royalties were being paid before. We won't say, the new board is in each which people since the 1980s and 1970s were getting money. But were they value royalties? Were all those leakages blocked? Was that the money that was to them? Were all avenues relevant used? So we want to re-engineer the process and make sure that it's not just a case of Nyama Antono for the Abaganda who know that saying. It is a case of people are making actual money, because this is life's work. This is actual work. People wake up in the morning and think and create work. Then the board is prioritizing working with government agencies to build partnerships for the protection and commercialization of works, so that it's not just UPRS running around, etc. Because we know copyright is a personal right. People get pangas when anything happens to their land. They cut people up. Meanwhile, that infringement might be a finger's length, but it's not the same spirit for copyright, and yet it's personal. So we want UPRS, being the collecting society for music, to be that person with the panga to go to the government and say, URSB, as our regulator, this is what we need. URA, as the person in tax, this blank tape levy, how do we do it? NITA, as a person who has computers, we need to monitor all this music, all these people, our members when they register. How can you help us? UCC, as a regulator of broadcasters, can you help us with those broadcasting lists for us to see how much music is played where, what songs are trending, etc. Local governments, how do you help us? We need to enforce in all spaces, because music is not just in Kampala. People in Arua are singing, people in West Nile, interface with Congo, with Sudan, so there's so much potential out there. But if UPRS is localized in Kampala, then nothing is happening. We need to engage local governments to see how do we collect, how do we make this thing big from just Kampala and reach out to members everywhere in the country. Uganda Police Force, there's people who are infringing. How do you help us? The good thing, URSB has set up an enforcement unit, and that enforcement unit for intellectual property can already help us, that we are no longer dealing with the other bleak police of long ago that you go and they had no idea what you're talking about. The DPP, if we brought a case to you, do you understand it that this is important? This is a live issue. There was UNCC in there, and the good thing we already have UNCC and NCF on board. How do we, go to our members, your members who are in the end our members? How does it all help us so that works are both protected and commercialized? Then we're also seeking partnerships provide value, additional value to members. It might be healthcare, it might be education, so that if these things can happen, for example, in public transport, there's no reason why those things should not happen for an industry that is capable of lifting this entire economy, because our music industry is big and has capacity. CMOs must work, because in countries like Nigeria, where they've embraced CMOs, everything is working. And now we see that Nigerian music is everywhere. Nollywood, those days used to be a funny thing, but now it's a very serious thing. It's, we need to go about it like that. Then capacity building for the CMO itself. So while we want to do all these nice things for the members, if the CMO is a lame entity, it might not help too much. How? If you don't have professional staff sitting at the CMO, whether you're collecting, that 30% that is there, you will not be, in the end, all these nice things you want to do for the members won't happen, because then there's no professional accountants, there's no legal person, there's, and then we also need to do training for both the staff at the CMO and the members themselves, like we're having today. People need to understand the subject matter of what they are doing. Then we need to build institutional capacity. And this we are already in the process of doing with involved NITA, URA, so that it's not just, UPRS is not a joke. This is an enforcer of people's livelihoods, and it's a serious thing. Then we want to also create a firm regional footprint, like I said, with the local governments, because it's not enough for UPRS to be in Kampala only. Even in Kampala, wherever our office is, it should be spread out in divisions, then we move district, then, so that is the strategy that UPRS, the current UPRS board, is looking at, that we took on, we came to an entity that was broken. There was much that was being done, but there were many things that had not been done, or things that had not gone well. However, we are now in the process of rebuilding. Rebuilding is a painful thing, because sometimes a person will say, I used to get some money before. You can move on to the next slide. But there's been so many things. Next slide, please. And we are playing the long game, that by 2023, worst case scenario. Of course, this can happen tomorrow, because as we've seen, Operation Wealth Creation has come in, and so much is being done. We leave behind, or we have a strong CM4 where people can actually sit home and say, I've sung for 10 years, I've retired. Now let me make money from all the songs. I'm sure Ragadi is cashing in on Peter. I used to like that song because he used to say Grace, I nafiga nefes, but a story for another day. He's cashing in on the song because it came back. It's a major hit. All kids who didn't know about it now know about it. It's interesting. So what are the takeaways from today's presentation? Really, collective management, while it might be a voluntary thing, it's necessary. Why? Get strength in numbers. And this is the world order. It's not something that Uganda, be members. Self-sabotage won't take us anywhere. Strength in numbers, because that's how it's done. When you think about it, you might enforce, and there are rights that, of course, you only can enforce. But these licenses here and there, only and only collective management can help. Whichever name you might choose to give the CMO, collective management is what will help. Bookkeeping, we must get into the habit of thinking about our works as business, not as flimsy things here and there. Keep records of the creation inputs, marketing inputs. What are the trends? When did this song sell? Why did it sell? For how long does my song sell? All that helps you in the next step of valuation. And in this bookkeeping, you can also say, I'm going to register. The government, I know that URSB is working so hard to bring down the cost of registration, because it understands that for a person can have 500 songs, but if the cost of registration is high, then it's just impossible. So there's lobbying to ensure that these laws, the money comes down, so that people just register. It's voluntary registration, but register, because then if you go for an assignment transaction, you have your certificate. It's easy to transact. If you want money from the bank or from a money lender, copyright, it is easy for the person to believe you, so all that. Then valuation of your work. Through bookkeeping, we'll be able to know the value of our work. My song can actually fetch me this much. Also, this valuation is tied into the collective management. Why? If UPRS is enforcing for you, they are tracking. Malamu has played this much, and I've made this much money. So even you, when you're creating your records, you can easily run to UPRS and ask them, how much money did Value get? How much money you're making. How much money did, I used to love seeing this music so much. I don't know if she knows exactly how much money, when I still had a lot of dancing, how much money that music is making. All those records could be able to be gotten from UPRS. Revenue strategy, we need to know, both as the collecting society and as artists, what is our revenue strategy? The revenue strategy of the current board is a long game. You don't want to do anything shortfall and just bangle things around, because that's why the initial system didn't work. We want to create a system that works. Then artists should know that this is my strategy. This is how I make. This is how I intend to make money. So there's so many things that could be said. So many things that could be said. But what we are saying today is know your rights. Know what category of rights you have. On to the next slide. Know what category of rights you have, and then join a CMO. If you're already a member of a CMO, get involved, get interested, not to necessarily be upset. And it's only human to be upset because the system didn't work before. And of course, people are allowed to be skeptical, but get involved to understand, how do we move on from here? What do we do? How? Because the future is bright and the possibilities are enormous. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for listening to me. Over to you, Anthony, and any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Hello. Good afternoon once again. Thank you for the broad presentation, Madam Grace. We are glad you've broadly explained the entire concept of copyright. And I guess our members have a lot of burning questions. But like we suggested, the questions can be posted in the chat window, and we shall have a moment for our members to have a Q&A. Let's first have the presentations go on as we wait to have the Q&A, but as well, Madam Grace's presentation has been pasted in the chat. We can access it right now. We shall also have it on the website later on after every